Our first indication that there was something going on was while we were walking down to maintenance control.
A plane has allegedly crashed into the World Trade Center.
We had known that an airplane had hit the tower. We had seen some television footage of it.
Rolling down the runway, get to almost pure vertical, and we get a knock-it-off call from the maintenance officer who's down at the comp cart.
And that's when it dawned on all of us as warfighters that our nation was under attack.
September 11th, 2001, one of the darkest moments in American history. In this episode, you'll hear the Blue Angel story from that morning, told by the men who lived it. From the last jet team flyover of the World Trade Center just months before the attacks, to the moment they were forced to abandon practice mid-maneuver, and how they stood ready to transform their mission from demonstration to forward deployed combat squadron. What you're about to hear is the first in a 4-part series produced in support of the Blue Angels Foundation and their mission to care for our nation's wounded veterans. All right, welcome back to the Blue Angel Phantoms channel. I'm your host, Ryan Nothhaft, and we have a really powerful episode in store today. We're going to be looking at the Blue Angels experience on one of the most defining days in modern history, and that's September 11th, 2001. Now, joining me are the two perfect guests to talk about this subject. We've got Boss Rob Ffield, who was the flight leader and commanding officer of the Blue Angels in 2001, and we've got Scott Kartvedt, who was the opposing solo during that year. So, gentlemen, really excited to have you on. This is a story I've wanted to dig into for quite a long time.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Great to be here.
Yeah.
You bet. So, yeah, Scott, before we hop in here, I want to talk to you real quick because this is actually the first of 4 episodes that we're going to do on this channel in the month of May that's really in alignment with Mental Health Awareness Month. And so we're not only going to bring you 4 great episodes about Blue Angel history, but we're going to be supporting a really fantastic organization. That's the Blue Angels Foundation. They do tremendous work supporting our wounded veterans transitioning into a civilian life and career. So, Scott, you're spearheading a lot of this work for the foundation, supporting our vets. Could you talk about the mission of the Blue Angels Foundation, and in particular, the services and care and support that you're providing around mental health? Because it's so critical to, treating people that, quite frankly, I consider my heroes.
Yeah, I'm happy to, Ryan, and thanks for having us on for such a unique episode and having 4 episodes that are going to support the Blue Angels Foundation. So as president of the Blue Angels Foundation, it is my distinct pleasure to raise money using the Blue Angels brand, a trusted and respected iconic brand for the last 79 years, to bring awareness to the suffering of our veterans and their families, but also to help raise funds to support them. And we do that through 3 avenues. Primarily, our partnership with Home Base, who is supported by the Red Sox Foundation and Massachusetts General Hospital. We have opened up clinics not only in Massachusetts, but we just recently announced a clinic in Pensacola, Florida, the cradle of naval aviation, with partnering with a local behavioral health facility there, Lakeview. We did that in November during our end of season events and celebration. And on May 1st, we're announcing a new partnership with Menninger Clinic in Houston to support our veterans and families there. And what it does is it provides 2 weeks of intensive PTSD treatment that is anonymous. It provides a continuum of care and gets our veterans and their families back into living like the rest of us in normal civilian life. That's the primary channel. The second is transitional housing out of Freedom Station. So imagine, if you will, that veterans that have had a limb amputated or have gone through significant PTSD or are learning to live with a service dog, they complete their occupational therapy, their physical therapy, and then they're sent home and they don't know how to live in their new reality. And so we opened Freedom Station 3 this year, which is a multi-unit facility that is centered around a fire pit, and so that at the end of the day, when a veteran may have had a bad day and their prosthetic fell off, and they can go out to the Blue Angel Foundation fire pit at Freedom Station 3, and they can say, you know what, I had a really crappy day. And the other veterans that are living there for free can say, I had a crappy day. And now they get to support each other and recognize that they're actually going through this together in the same team and unit that they had when they were in the service. And then the third avenue is supporting service dogs and providing service dogs to our veterans. So I appreciate you letting me share what we do. And I want to thank you and the listeners of Blue Angel Phantom Channel that are willing to hear our stories, kind of the behind the scenes of the team, and support what we're doing with our veterans.
It's such critical work. And so if viewers want to support the Blue Angels Foundation, you can do that. Go to the link directly in the description below. It'll be the first link you see, and you can make a donation. They'll go directly to the Blue Angels Foundation. Now, out of a token of my appreciation, if you make a donation, you'll immediately become eligible for a drawing that I'm going to do on July 1st, 2025. And the winner of that drawing is going to receive 3 gifts from me. The first one you're going to receive is this Blue Angel Phantoms trucker hat. You can't buy these anywhere. I don't sell them. The second item you're going to receive is a copy of one of my favorite books. It's a coffee table book by Rob Bogan. It's called Blue Angels Homecoming. She is a fantastic photographer out there in Pensacola, does amazing work. And finally, you're going to receive this beautiful art piece. It's a paint-brushed metal that you see right behind me in this studio. And it's a chronology of all the Blue Angel aircraft that the Blue Angels have flown over their 79-year history. It's by Chris Bogan. He's an amazing, amazing artist out there in Pensacola. So I'd be thrilled if you make a donation. Again, that will put you in a drawing for that. Now, if you make a donation of $250 or more, I am going to send you a Blue Angel Phantoms trucker hat. So you'll get that, right? So the key thing here is got to use the link in the description below. And then look, the Blue Angels Foundation, as you heard, they're a top-notch organization. So they're not going to share your contact information with anyone, including me. So the key thing is here, you make your donation, they're going to send you an email back. At the top of that email, there's going to be a link where you opt into this drawing, or if you give the $250, you opt in to get your hat. So you got to fill out that form real quick. You just provide me your name and contact information, and I can get you 1 in that drawing, and then 2, get you your hat. So enough of that. Appreciate any support you can give the Blue Angels Foundation, but let's hop in to the topic of the day, and that is September 11th, 2001. And Ffield, I want to start with you, and actually want to start with the months before 9/11, because the Blue Angels did a flyover Lower Manhattan. So could you tell me why the Blues were in Lower Manhattan in, I believe, June of 2001?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks again for having us and sharing a little bit of the history here. It kind of a unique story. We were in Lakehurst, New Jersey, doing an air show on the 1st and 2nd of June. And as many people know about how the Blue Angels and also the Thunderbirds work, we arrive at a show site on Thursday, do a circle and arrival, do a practice. And then typically Friday is a practice show. In this particular case, we were going to use the Friday morning prior to that practice show to fly up to New York City and get some pictures for our lithograph that we use every year for the subsequent year. So the 2001 would then be the 2002 lithograph. So we did just that. We briefed, we took off, we flew up with a Delta, and we took a 2-seat jet to be the photo bird. And we went up and down the Hudson River, taking some pictures, and you can see what this looks like over my right shoulder here. The story behind this, though, was we got back, and we're still using 35 millimeter cameras back then. Digital was just becoming a thing, and we weren't quite there yet. We got the photos back, and it was just one of those days, Northeast environmentals, where the sun's coming up. It's probably 11 o'clock or so, and it was a very hazy day. And so the background of New York City just, didn't look very crisp, I'll put it that way. So we kind of filed that away. We got those pictures and thought, well, we might have to look for another venue to get a picture for the next year's lithograph. And again, we do the same thing. And then subsequent to that, obviously 9/11 happened, and we realized that we were the last team to fly by the Twin Towers. And, we decided to take this photograph that you see again over my right shoulder and put a little caption in there, say dedicated to freedom. And that's for all the men and women that fight for our freedom, lost their lives for that, and the first responders. So it really meant a lot for us. But that lithograph has quite a history behind it, and it has subsequently, not only for the follow-on season, been an interesting talking point, but I routinely run into folks since then, even to today, that have seen that lithograph, and it means a lot to us. So uh, there's the history behind the 9/11 lithograph from the Blue Angels, 2002.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous photo, and I recently acquired it, and it's going up in this studio soon. So Manhattan, right? It's a packed place, a lot of people in a small amount of space, and there's 3 airports in and around there. So, I mean, what are your memories and the logistics of conducting such a flyover with such a condensed space and a lot of airplanes flying around? I'm sure you have some memories from that day.
Sure. Yeah, it was actually the team makes it easy for the boss in that regard. They did all the coordination. That would be Dino Martin and Cello Caceres did all the coordination with ATC, and they just turned us over to Newark Approach, actually, which owns most of the airspace, and somehow they carved some of that out from New York Approach and Center. So we just talked to them, and then towards the end of the fly. But by the way, the interesting thing for me was my sister lives up near the Tappan Zee Bridge, and so we went up, and I was turning over her house each time. So I think we made 3 or 4 passes. I don't remember exactly. And then we did a flyby Newark Airport. They kind of shut down the takeoff and landings for a little bit for us to do that. So that was interesting. But yeah, neat flying by New York for sure, seeing all the tall buildings there, and we're right down in it. So yeah.
Hey, boss. Yeah, Ryan. I was going to say I've got to jump in real quick. So, as boss is leading the formation, and the air traffic control did an incredible job protecting the airspace, and we don't get much of an opportunity to look around because of the tight formation that we're flying. But boss glossed over the Newark flyby, and I happened to be on the right outpost. So yeah, this is what I recall of that particular flyby. And you have to recognize that Boss Field being just an incredible boss that drove the formation into even a remarkable show in that it was always tight. So he was always pushing to make things better and better and better. So we're finishing up our Hudson River flybys, and Boss Field comes up and asks Newark Approach if we can do a flyby of Newark. And they said, absolutely. So they shut down the airspace, and we take the Delta down runway 4 from south to north. I'm on the right side, and it's the only time that now I can actually see Newark looking through the formation. And I recall looking up at the Newark terminals as we went down the runways, and I have a very vivid image of that as we announced our presence with authority in Newark and said goodbye to Manhattan and headed back to Lakehurst. So it's a very memorable, impactful photo shoot for me in that regard.
I'm sure it's memorable for the people at the airport. So excellent. Why don't we transition to actually, one of the most probably traumatic days for a lot of Americans who were alive during that time period, September 11th. What are your memories from that morning? Walk me through that day, and specifically, how did you learn of the initial terror attacks?
Well, let me start off, and then Intake jump in, with what you recall. But really, it was like any other practice. So it's a Tuesday, obviously. So we're back from the show the previous week. Take Monday as a day to kind of recoup a little bit. So we don't do any practice. It's really maintenance and administrative functions that happen that day. So it's our first practice for that week to prepare for the next show. And we brief in the morning very early, go through the brief as we always do, and then walk to the jets. And our first indication that there was something going on was while we were walking down to maintenance control, and walked by the pilot shop on the way down there, and they've got the video up, and we're watching the airplane go into the first tower. And, at that point, no one can really fathom, that it would be terrorism. We thought it was some kind of anomaly where an aircraft had a malfunction of some type and happened to hit the tower. So we suit up, and one of the things about the Blues, you have to focus to do this kind of business safely. And we go down to maintenance control like we always do. We do the walk down, we get in our jets, we fire them up. We get out to the runway and we do it's going to be the diamond takeoff loop initially. And the solos are on the other end of the runway, and they're going to do their section maneuvers as they after we are clear. And we just go through our normal sequence of events, and we are rolling down the runway, get to almost pure vertical, and we get a knock it off call from the maintenance officer who's down at the comp cart with the dock. So it's Alan Blackston and Tamara Snur, and no one ever talks to the boss or the lead solo during a maneuver, just because you're so focused and it's such an important time to not have any distractions. So that was extremely odd. But in our training, we always talk about you always continue with the maneuver. So we just continue with the loop, bottom out, clear, and then we knock it off from my position. And that's when we were told that we had to land quickly. We climb up, and usually the aircraft are very heavy. They're full of fuel at this point. So we dump fuel above 6,000 feet, which is the protocol for that. And meantime, they're telling us to land right away. And, I just wanted to make sure we had a safe recovery with everybody because, heavy jets have the tendency to have a hard time stopping. So we end up landing, taxiing back in. And that's once we go through maintenance control, and so forth, and get back up, that's when we find out that there was a second aircraft that hit. And so that's my memory from that part. There's some more later in the day, but I'll turn it over to Intake to talk about, from a solo perspective, what they saw.
Yeah, I appreciate that, boss. I can remember walking down, because we walked together as the 6 pilots as we head out to the jets, and we had known that an airplane had hit the tower. We had seen some television footage of it. And the first thought was that it was a small aircraft owned by somebody that was fairly inexperienced, and we just couldn't imagine that they had accidentally flown into one of the World Trade Centers. And we got out to the jets, and as Judge and I, Keith Hoskins and I, were sitting at the end of the runway watching the Diamond take off, getting ready for our takeoff maneuvers, as boss said, the knock-it-off came at a very strange time, and it was unusual. And then there wasn't a whole lot of communication as to why we had knocked it off, what was landing. We just knew that we needed to land quickly. And so we get back into maintenance control, see that the second airplane had hit the other tower. And that's when it dawned on all of us as warfighters that our nation was under attack. And back in the 1950s, the only time the team had disbanded and gone to war was during the Korean War. And you can read about it in any of the literature that the team became VF-191 Satan's Kittens and went to Korea as a single squadron. And so we immediately began to consider operationally what it would take to turn blue jets with smoke systems into gray warfighting jets and replace the smoke system with the 20 millimeter Vulcan cannon. We advertised it at 72 hours in the literature, but could we actually do that? And I just remember the immediate light switch from airshow pilot back to strike fighter pilot, and we all made that switch, and there was no hesitation by anybody. How do we do it, and how do we support the mission and go after the enemies that had attacked our citizenry and our citizens? And so that was very clear to me. It gets a little gray in the late morning, early afternoon as to what was happening and what we were going to do. And I think that fog of war that the entire country had at that time. But I do distinctly remember thinking, okay, it's time to fight. How do we turn these airshow airplanes back into warfighters?
And if you were going to turn those airplanes back into warfighters, you mentioned the cannon. Obviously, you would have to paint the airplanes. What other modifications would need to take place to the squadron to make that happen?
Well, we're a full-up squadron. A typical, the Blue Angels do air shows with about 110 maintainers, personnel, totally maintainers, admin, and everything. A typical F-18 squadron at that time was probably in the 175 range, slightly different mission. But we certainly could form the nucleus, if you will, of a hard fighting squadron. And remember, we all came from the fleet, so everybody's got experience with combat and training for combat. So it wouldn't take too much to get back in there. I will tell you that I recall calling my boss, Admiral Boyington, down at Sinatra, just to check in and kind of told him what we were thinking. And obviously, let's wait and see how this all plays out, which we did. But it was very interesting times. And I'll just tell you, subsequent to this, there's some interesting stories about and things we learned about the Blue Angels that are maybe important to reflect upon. And that is, there's a couple days stand down until we were able to fly again. And then we did some shows over the field. And we rapidly found, how important focus was, because the Blue Angels are designed to work remotely and at show sites. And we found that we started losing our focus a little bit in the next subsequent weeks. So after, about a week and a half of that, and having some small incidents that could have been larger incidents, we decided as a team that we needed to get back out to El Centro, which, during a time when you would want to be with your family and support them, we knew we were going to go back on the road at some point. So we went out to El Centro, which is typically our winter training ground, but we sequestered ourselves out there for a week and focused really hard. And the follow-on, our very first show after 9/11 was Alliance Field in Texas. And Scott and I have talked about this before, but Intake, why don't you maybe talk about your recollection of that show? Because that's a really interesting story as well. The very first post 9/11 air show, I thought was really memorable for me.
Yeah, this was mid-October at Alliance Field, and the crowds were massive. Just incredible patriotism out there. And this is, I have these snapshots of different shows, and this is what I remember about Alliance. As we walk to the jet, there's just a roar of a crowd, because now we are representing all of the armed forces, certainly the 380,000 sailors and 180,000 Marines. And my takeoff maneuver at the time was a low transition, high performance climb, split S. So I pitch up vertical, roll inverted, split S, and come back down the crowd line. And so it was a north to south takeoff, and I pitch up, roll inverted, and I'm looking down on I-35 just north of Dallas by Alliance Field. The freeway is stopped. All of the cars are parked on the freeway. There are giant American flags that people are waving on the side of the freeway within the crowd. And I have goosebumps actually telling the story right now, Ryan. And that's the moment that I looked down and realized that there were hundreds of thousands of people there. And what they needed and what they got from us was the representation of the power and strength of our United States. And we had the privilege of representing our armed forces. But I just remember in that moment thinking, wow, this is incredible. And then as we parked the jets after the show and we cracked the canopies and raised them all together, the roar of the crowd was deafening. Because people finally got to release that pride and energy and in the country. It was incredible.
You guys stayed on the team both of you through, I think, 2002. Did that sentiment continue throughout your tenure on the Blue Angels?
Yeah, I think for my part, absolutely. And, it really does to this day. The folks that go to the air shows are they're all patriots. And it was extra special then. And I would also say From a team perspective, we represent the men and women of the Navy and Marine Corps, and then in general, the armed forces and first responders. And it's really a noble calling, if you will. As Scott was alluding to, we wanted to get into the fight ourselves, but we have another mission. And subsequently they did. We stayed doing air shows, but it was an incredible time, and there was, you felt a real pride in doing your best to represent everybody, first responders and so forth, for the rest of the 2 seasons that we had remaining, really, between the two of us here, and it was really a special time, and I know that continues, but post 9/11, there was definitely this aura of, we're the United States, and we're not going to let anybody push us around. And you could just feel it coming from the crowd.
And so, the war on terror started to ramp up, especially around the time you both left the team. Talk to me about your post Blue Angel career. How did you support the war on terror as you moved back to the fleet?
Sure. I'll start off and then over to Scott. But, a couple things. There were some leadership lessons for me. And, this would be a lesson from the Blue Angels in general, but I think it was magnified by 9/11. And that was, the way I think about it, high-performing teams kind of have 3 elements. They've got passion for what they're doing. And the Blue Angels certainly have that. And that passion is magnified if you have a noble calling. And certainly doing what we were doing post 9/11, we felt was a noble calling. You've got to be focused. And we've talked a little bit about that here today. And there's some free will too. And free will can come in a lot of different ways, and more than we have time to get into today, but just the free will of the country. And you combine all those with the ethos, if you will, of the U.S. military and the history behind it, ever since, our founding. It's just, perpetuating that legacy is important. And then everybody on the team goes back to the fleet in some way, shape, or form, if you will. And so we had people, going right back into the mix, into combat. We were subsequent doing that. And for myself, I ended up being an Air Wing commander of Air Wing 7, and did a lot of overseas work as well. But and then on into the Pentagon and so forth. But that war on terror, the biggest takeaway I would say is that don't mess with the United States. We're going to come back and get you. And I think we've proven that out. But Scott, over to you.
Yeah, Boss and I left the team in November of 2002, and we were still trying to determine what our nation's response was going to be. And so we left the team and went to the Fleet Replacement Squadron. I went to the one on the East Coast, BFA 106, to get some weapons refresher training. And the weapons had changed a bit since we had been on the team. So there were GPS-guided munitions, joint direct attack munition, laser-guided bombs, and delivering those can take some training. And so I got back to the Fleet Replacement Squadron, and they said, hey, you're just going to go straight over to Carrier Air Wing 8 on the USS Roosevelt. They are off the coast of Cyprus in the Eastern Mediterranean. And we're going to get you carrier qualified, and then you're headed to war. And I said, well, I'd like some training. And they said, you're a Blue Angel. And I said, well, if you want me to fly inverted over the enemy, I'm the best in the world. I had just left the team, but if you want me to employ, I would like some additional weapons training. And they said, no, you'll be fine. And so I went out to the USS Stennis in San Diego, carrier qualified, and within 10 days was out on the USS Roosevelt. My first flight was a warm up around the carrier, and the second flight was over Turkey, and my weapons training was on a KY-58 encrypted radio over Turkey, going through the weapons functionality and recording, if you will, because we needed to record the weapons and the delivery at that time, and then we turned south into Tikrit and Mosul. And so returning to the fleet and actually getting to employ against the enemy right after leaving the team is exactly what I had the opportunity to do. And there was no other place that I would have rather been.
Well, I appreciate both of you joining me today to tell this story. I've been looking forward to hearing this for a long time, so I appreciate you making time. Folks, remember, if you want to support the Blue Angels Foundation, they're doing great work supporting our wounded veterans as they transition back into a civilian career. Click the link in the description below if you want to make a donation, and be on the lookout for our next episode, which will drop a week from today. Gentlemen, thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Glad to be here.